For the longest time, America's edge wasn't just a turn of phrase, it was a geopolitical reality backed by an absolutely colossal military budget. We're talking numbers so large they make Jeff Bezos's pocket change look like, well, actual pocket change. The US still boasts the largest military expenditure on the planet, with bases peppered across the globe like an overzealous chef with a salt shaker. This formidable presence has historically projected power and, theoretically, stability. But in an increasingly complex world, does simply having the biggest stick automatically mean you win every argument? Or does it just make everyone else nervous and more inclined to find their own, slightly smaller, but perhaps more strategically useful sticks? It's a question worth pondering, especially when the cost of that stick could fund, say, universal healthcare or fix a few potholes. Just a thought. Then there's the economic front, where the US dollar has long reigned supreme as the world's reserve currency. This has given America incredible leverage, a sort of financial superpower that underpins its global influence. However, the winds of change are blowing, and they smell suspiciously like other currencies. Countries, and not just the usual suspects, are increasingly looking to diversify their reserves, to de-dollarize, if you will. It's a slow burn, not an overnight collapse, but it's happening. Think of it like everyone at a party suddenly realizing they don't to use the host's ridiculously overpriced artisanal ice cubes. They can, in fact, bring their own. This diversification signals a subtle but significant erosion of a key pillar of American economic dominance, making the global financial system a bit more multipolar. And speaking of economic shifts, let's talk about the roaring engines of countries like China and India. For decades, the US economy was the undisputed global locomotive, pulling everyone else along. But now, other locomotives are chugging along with impressive speed and power. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or perhaps the former president in the golf cart. Donald Trump's tenure in the White House wasn't just a blip on the radar of international relations, it was more like a sustained meteor shower. For many global leaders and populations, his presidency crystallized a rather unsettling thought. The United States, the supposed bedrock of the post-war liberal order, could no longer be taken for granted. The reliability that had, for the most part, characterized American foreign policy for decades suddenly seemed like a quaint relic of a bygone era. It was a 4-year-long international trust exercise where one participant kept threatening to pull the rug out from under everyone else. Consider, for instance, the sheer speed and apparent glee with which the Trump administration withdrew from key international agreements. The Paris Climate Accord, a painstakingly negotiated global effort to combat climate change, gone. The Iran nuclear deal, a complex agreement designed to prevent nuclear proliferation, ripped up. These weren't minor policy tweaks, they were seismic shifts that sent shockwaves through the international community. It signaled to allies that commitments made by one US administration could be summarily discarded by the next, making long-term strategic partnerships feel incredibly precarious. It's hard to build a house on shifting sands, especially when the sand occasionally tweets insults at you. And it wasn't just about treaties and agreements. So what happens if the world, or at least significant chunks of it, stops instinctively looking to the US for leadership? It's a scenario that's moving from the realm of academic speculation to something resembling our current reality. If America's guiding hand falters or is perceived to be unreliable or self-serving, the natural consequence isn't a vacuum but rather a scramble. Nations like nature abhor a vacuum, and they will invariably seek to fill it, leading to a potentially more fragmented and unpredictable global landscape. It's less one conductor leading the orchestra and more several bands playing different tunes in the same park. We may well be heading towards, or arguably are already in, a more divided global structure. Think less of a unipolar world dominated by a single superpower, or even a bipolar world like the Cold War, and more of a multipolar or even a polynodal arrangement. This is a world where no single nation calls all the shots, but rather regional powers exert significant influence within their spheres, and sometimes beyond. It's a more complex, perhaps more chaotic, but also potentially more democratized international system. The old certainties are fading, replaced by a more fluid and contested environment where influence is more diffuse. Look at Asia, for example. China is undeniably asserting itself as the dominant regional power with ambitions that extend far beyond its borders. Its economic might, growing military capabilities, and proactive diplomacy are reshaping the strategic calculus for every nation in the region, and indeed for the US itself. Beijing is no longer content to be a follower. It aims to be a leader, at least in its part of the world, and it's building the infrastructure, both literal and diplomatic, to support that ambition. This creates a new center of gravity that other Asian nations must navigate, with or without American guidance. Meanwhile, in Europe, the European Union, despite its internal complexities and bureaucratic hurdles, and oh, are there hurdles, is increasingly striving for strategic autonomy. This doesn't necessarily mean a break from the US, but it does signify a desire to be more self-reliant in terms of security, economic policy, and technological development. With the traditional top dog looking a bit, shall we say, distracted, the question naturally arises, who's auditioning for the lead role in the grand theatre of global power? It's not quite as simple as one nation stepping down and another seamlessly stepping up. It's more like a casting call where multiple actors think they've got what it takes. And let's be clear, China is not just auditioning, it's practically building its own stage, complete with state-of-the-art lighting and a very ambitious script. Beijing is making no secret of its desire to be a, if not leading global superpower in the 21st century. China's strategy is multifaceted and incredibly ambitious. The Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, is a prime example, a colossal global infrastructure development project spanning continents, designed to enhance connectivity, boost trade, and not coincidentally extend Beijing's economic and political influence. Through massive investments in ports, railways, highways, and energy projects across Asia, Africa, and even parts of Europe, China is literally reshaping the physical and economic landscape, creating networks of interdependence that naturally orient participating countries towards Beijing. It's soft power delivered with very hard cash and concrete. Beyond infrastructure, China is also rapidly modernizing its military, developing capabilities that increasingly challenge America's long-standing dominance, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. From an expanding blue water navy to advancements in cyber warfare and space technology, Beijing is signaling that it intends to be a military peer, capable of protecting its interests and projecting power far from its shores. This military growth, coupled with its economic leverage, means China is contesting US influence on virtually every front, from trade and technology standards to diplomatic sway in international organizations. The dragon is well and truly awake, and it's got an agenda. But China isn't the only actor looking to carve out a more significant global role. The European Union, for all its internal squabbles, represents a massive economic bloc with considerable regulatory power and a renewed push for greater strategic independence. While not a traditional military superpower in the way the US or China are, the EU's ability to set global standards in areas like data privacy, think GDPR, and environmental protection gives it a unique form of influence. Now, amidst all this talk of shifting power balances and rising challenges, it's important not to write America's obituary just yet. Reports of its demise, to paraphrase Mark Twain, who was probably misquoted anyway, may be greatly exaggerated. The US isn't suddenly a spent force, relegated to the footnotes of history. It still possesses a formidable array of assets and advantages that many other nations can only dream of. The question isn't whether the US remain a leading global player, but whether it make the necessary adjustments and investments to do so in a rapidly changing world. Think of it less as a fading star and more as a seasoned performer who needs to update their act for a new audience. One of America's most significant enduring strengths lies in its powerful and innovative technology sector. Silicon Valley, despite its own set of very Silicon Valley-esque problems, remains a global hub for innovation, driving advancements in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, software, and countless other fields that will shape the future. This technological dynamism fuels economic growth, creates high-value jobs, and gives the US a critical edge in an increasingly tech-driven world. The ability to invent, adapt, and commercialize new technologies is a powerful currency in the 21st century, and the US still holds a lot of it. Complementing this is America's world-leading system of higher education and research. Its universities consistently rank among the best globally, attracting talent from every corner of the planet and producing cutting-edge research across all disciplines. This intellectual capital is a vital engine for innovation and progress, not just domestically but globally. The ideas and discoveries incubated in American labs and lecture halls have a profound impact on the world, contributing to scientific breakthroughs, economic development, and solutions to global challenges. This brainpower is an asset that shouldn't be underestimated. Furthermore, despite recent challenges to its status, the US dollar remains a dominant force in global finance, and American capital markets are the deepest and most liquid in the world. Chapter 6. Our Sanctions. The diplomatic sledgehammer that sometimes just annoys the nail and occasionally hits your own thumb. When diplomacy falters, or a sterner message is deemed necessary, one of America's most frequently deployed tools is economic sanctions. It's the go-to move, the foreign policy equivalent of turning it off and on again, but with significantly more complex geopolitical ramifications. The idea is simple. Squeeze a country's economy hard enough and it will change its behavior. But the reality, as is so often the case in international relations, is far more muddled. Have these sanctions, particularly those leveled against major players like Russia and China, actually worked as intended? The answer is a resounding it's complicated, and often not really. Let's take the case of Russia. In response to its aggression, most notably the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the US and its allies unleashed an unprecedented barrage of sanctions targeting Russian banks, oligarchs, energy exports, and access to technology. The initial shock was palpable, and these measures have undoubtedly inflicted economic pain. Russia's economy has been forced to adapt, its access to Western markets and finance severely curtailed. However, if the primary goal was to cripple Russia's war machine or force a swift withdrawal from Ukraine, the results have been, to put it mildly, underwhelming. The war grinds on, funded by a Russian economy that has proven more resilient than many expected. A key reason for this resilience is Russia's strategic pivot. Faced with Western sanctions, Moscow has actively cultivated deeper economic ties with countries not participating in the sanctions regime, most notably China and India, but also nations in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. These countries have been happy to buy Russian oil and gas, often at discounted prices, providing Moscow with crucial revenue streams. This has effectively created a parallel economic system, blunting the impact of Western sanctions and highlighting the limits of US financial leverage when a significant portion of the world isn't playing along. Chapter 7. Is anyone still listening, or is America just shouting into an increasingly indifferent geopolitical void? For a long time, when Washington spoke, the world, or at least a significant portion of it, listened, maybe not always agreeing, maybe sometimes grumbling, but generally paying close attention. America still has a powerful voice, and it certainly still has allies who value the relationship. However, there's a growing sense that the attentiveness of those ears, even among friends, isn't what it once was. The automatic deference to American leadership or pronouncements is fading, replaced by a more discerning and at times skeptical reception. It's like being the person at the dinner party who used to tell captivating stories but now finds people subtly checking their phones while they talk. Consider some of America's closest traditional allies in Europe. Countries like Germany and France, while still valuing the transatlantic alliance, are increasingly vocal about the need for European strategic autonomy. This isn't just rhetoric. It's reflected in efforts to bolster European defense capabilities, develop independent foreign policy initiatives, and sometimes take positions that diverge from Washington's. They are seeking to be partners, yes, but partners with their own distinct voice and interests, not just echoes of American policy. The days of Europe simply falling in line are, it seems, largely over. Even the United Kingdom, historically America's most steadfast ally, has shown signs of forging a more independent path post-Brexit, seeking new global partnerships and occasionally adopting nuanced positions that reflect its own specific national interests rather than automatically aligning with the US. While the special relationship remains significant, particularly in intelligence and defense, it's no longer an unquestioning allegiance. The dynamics are evolving, reflecting a broader trend of established allies reassessing the terms of their engagement with a sometimes unpredictable American partner. Beyond the traditional Western alliance structure, the picture is even more complex. Chapter 8. Trade Deals. Can Uncle Sam get back to shaking hands and signing on those infamous dotted lines? For decades, the United States was the architect and champion of global trade liberalization, forging landmark deals that reshaped the world economy. Think NAFTA, the WTO, and various bilateral agreements. These deals, for better or worse, were a cornerstone of American economic statecraft. But in recent years, the US has become noticeably more skeptical of large-scale trade agreements and in some cases outright hostile to them. So the big question is, can the US rediscover its mojo for making big trade deals? And perhaps more importantly, does it even want to? Rebuilding those economic bridges, whether with Europe, key Asian partners, or even figuring out the Gordian knot of China, is a monumental challenge. Let's start with Europe. The transatlantic trade relationship is one of the largest and most important in the world. However, it's also been strained. The Trump-era tariffs on European steel, aluminum, and other goods, often justified on dubious national security grounds, left a bitter taste. While some of those tensions have eased, a lingering caution remains in Brussels and other European capitals. There's a wariness about America's commitment to stable, rules-based trade and a desire from the EU to assert its own trade agenda, focusing on sustainability, labor rights, and digital sovereignty. Forging a new ambitious US-EU trade pact would require overcoming significant differences and rebuilding a deep level of trust. Moving to Asia, countries like South Korea and Japan remain vital US allies and crucial economic partners. They have existing trade agreements with the US, but these relationships are not without their complexities.